In the split second before darkness took over, the last thing Marcus ever saw was the blurred, clenched fist of the state rushing toward his face. He didn't see a judge. He didn't see a jury. He didn't see a warrant. He saw only the raw, unchecked impulse of a man with a badge who had decided, in that fleeting moment, that punishment was his to dole out. The human eye is a marvel of biological engineering. It is resilient, designed to withstand wind, dust, and the occasional bump. But it is not designed to withstand the full focused kinetic energy of a grown man's punch, delivered with the intent to destroy. When that kind of force meets the delicate sphere of the eye, physics takes over. The result is not a bruise. It is a rupture. This is the story of a sunny afternoon in a quiet suburb of Oakwood Heights, Ohio. It is the story of a roofing worker, a nervous neighbor, and a police department that treated a non-emergency call like a Tier 1 terrorist threat. It is the story of how a single phone call stripped a man of his sight forever, and how a federal jury was forced to put a price tag on darkness. But before we descend into the chaos of that afternoon, I want to ask you to take a second to look around the room you are in right now. Look at the colors, the light, the faces of the people you love. Now imagine if someone turned that switch off permanently because they were bored and looking for a fight. If you believe that those who enforce the law must also obey it, please make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We dig deep into the stories that the system often tries to bury. The day began with the kind of mundane normalcy that makes tragedy feel impossible. It was mid-October in Oakwood Heights. The air was crisp, the leaves were turning that burnt orange hue that signals the end of autumn, and the neighborhood of Crestview was quiet. It was the kind of neighborhood where lawns are manicured to the millimeter, where fences are purely decorative, and where silence is a currency. Marcus Thorne, a 34-year-old man with a history of hard knocks and hard work, was on his way to a job. Marcus wasn't a corporate executive. He was a laborer. He fixed roofs. He worked with his hands. On this particular Tuesday, he was riding with his coworker and friend, Elias. They were heading to a site, but they needed tools. Elias realized he'd left a specific set of shears back at his mother's house, which happened to be right there in Crestview. They parked the truck. They got out. Two men in work clothes, walking with purpose, cutting through the side yard of a house Elias had access to. It was a shortcut. It was efficiency. In any other timeline, in any other reality, this would be a non-event. It would be two guys grabbing a toolbox and getting back to work. But we don't live in that reality. We live in a world of hypervigilance, where the sight of the unfamiliar triggers a primal defensive instinct in some people. Across the street, a neighbor was watching. She was peering through her blinds, the way people do when they have too much time and too much anxiety. She didn't recognize Marcus. She didn't recognize Elias. To her, they weren't roofers running behind schedule. They were youths. They were suspicious. They were an anomaly in her perfectly curated view of the street. She picked up the phone. Now, it is important to note here, crucially important, that she did not call 911. She did not scream that someone was breaking in. She did not report a weapon. She called the non-emergency administrative line of the Oakwood Heights Police Department. "Hi," she said, her voice steady, but laced with that specific suburban wariness. "I just wanted to report something odd. There are two kids, maybe late teens, walking through the backyards near Miller Street. I don't know them. I just thought someone should maybe drive by." Just drive by. That was the request. A community policing check. A roll down the window and wave situation. But inside the Oakwood Heights precinct, the atmosphere was different. It was a slow Tuesday. The radio had been dead silence for hours. Boredom in a police station is a dangerous thing. When adrenaline junkies have nothing to do, they start looking for a spark. When that call came in, two suspicious males, it didn't register as a welfare check. It registered as action. The dispatcher relayed the message. And what happened next can only be described as a tactical overreaction of absurd proportions. They didn't send one car. They didn't send a beat cop to cruise past at 20 miles an hour. They sent the cavalry. 8 police cruisers peeled out of the station. 8. For a report of two guys walking through a yard. Dashcam footage recovered later would show the insanity of the response. These officers were driving as if they were responding to an active shooter at a bank. They were weaving into oncoming traffic, forcing civilian cars to swerve into ditches. Sirens were wailing. Engines were redlining. They were cutting corners, drifting through intersections, rushing toward Miller Street with a hunger that was palpable. Why? Why the urgency? Why the speed? Because they were hunting. Marcus and Elias had retrieved the tools. They were walking back toward the main road, intending to catch the bus because Elias's truck had stalled out in the driveway. They were walking along the shoulder of the road because, ironically, this pristine neighborhood didn't have sidewalks. Marcus heard it first, the wail of sirens. Then he saw the lights, blue and red fracturing the daylight, bouncing off the siding of the houses. Marcus Thorne was not a man who trusted the police. He had a record. He had a past struggle with substance abuse. He'd been through the system, chewed up, and spit out. He knew that for a guy like him, wearing a hoodie, looking rough around the edges, police contact rarely ended with a handshake. He saw the first cruiser drift around the corner, tires screeching. Then the second, then the third. His heart hammered against his ribs. Not again, he thought. I'm just going to work. I'm just walking. Elias looked at him. Dude, what is going on? I don't know, Marcus said, his voice tight. But I'm not dealing with this. Marcus did what any instinctual creature does when faced with a predator. He tried to create distance. He didn't sprint initially. He just turned away. He walked briskly toward the bus stop, hoping to fade into the background, hoping that the armada of police cars was heading somewhere else, for someone else. But then, Officer Derek Vance arrived. Officer Vance was a man who, according to later testimony, was amped up. He was a supervisor's nightmare, a bundle of aggression looking for a target. He slammed his cruiser into park, not even fully stopped, and bailed out of the door. He spotted Marcus, and the switch flipped. "Hey, you, stop!" Vance screamed. Marcus saw the officer. He saw the aggression in Vance's body language, the way his hand hovered over his belt, the forward lean of a tackler. Marcus panicked. The fight or flight response is hardwired into our DNA, deeper than logic, deeper than law. Marcus chose flight. He turned and ran. Now, before we judge that decision, I want to ask you something. If you saw a group of armed men screaming at you, driving like maniacs, and looking at you with pure hostility, would you calmly stand still? Or would your legs start moving before your brain could catch up? Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where panic took the wheel? Marcus ran toward a fence line. He wasn't running toward a weapon. He wasn't running with stolen goods. He was just running away from the noise and the fear. Officer Vance gave chase. And this is where the body camera audio becomes chilling. Usually in a foot pursuit, you hear heavy breathing. You hear commands like, "Stop, police," or "Get on the ground." But Officer Vance wasn't shouting commands. He was shouting a battle cry. "Woo! Yeah, baby! I'ma tase you! I'ma tase you, dude! Come here!" He sounded like a teenager playing a video game. He sounded like a Viking berserker charging into a monastery. He was whooping. He was celebrating the hunt. He wasn't a peacekeeper in that moment. He was a predator closing the gap on his prey. Marcus reached a chain-link fence. He scrambled up, his boots slipping on the metal mesh. He vaulted over, but the landing was bad. He stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward into the dirt of the adjacent yard. He was trapped. He was tired. He was done. Officer Vance hit the fence a second later. He went over. Marcus was on the ground. He was on his knees, turning slightly. His hands were coming up, not in fists, but in that universal gesture of surrender. The "okay, you got me" posture. He was winded. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't reaching for a waistband. Officer Vance didn't care. Vance landed on the other side of the fence, took 2 steps, and closed the distance. He didn't pull out handcuffs. He didn't use a control hold. He wound up. The camera angle on the body cam shakes violently, but the audio captures the wet, sickening thud. Officer Vance, a large, muscular man, delivered a full-force sucker punch directly into the face of Marcus Thorne. He didn't hit his jaw. He didn't hit his nose. His knuckles drove straight into Marcus's left eye socket. Imagine a grape. A large, ripe, purple grape from the grocery store. Now imagine placing that grape on a concrete counter and smashing it with a hammer. That is, medically speaking, what happened to Marcus's eyeball. The globe of the eye ruptured. The vitreous humor, the jelly that gives the eye its shape, exploded outward. The orbital bone, the socket itself, fractured under the impact. The world went black for Marcus. The pain wasn't immediate. It was a shockwave that rattled his teeth and shut down his nervous system. Then came the screaming. "Get on your stomach! Get on your stomach!" Vance roared, standing over the man he had just maimed. Marcus was writhing in the dirt, clutching his face. "My eye! Oh, God! My eye!" Vance grabbed Marcus's arm, wrenching it behind his back. "Stop resisting! Give me your hands!" "I'm not resisting," Marcus sobbed, blood beginning to pour through his fingers. "Please, you hurt me. I can't see." Other officers began to arrive, hopping the fence, swarming the scene. They saw a suspect on the ground, bleeding. They saw their colleague, Vance, panting and adrenaline dumped. "What happened?" one officer asked. "He tried to pull away." Vance lied instantly. It was a reflex, the blue wall of silence being built brick by brick in real time. "He moved, and I struck him." Marcus was handcuffed. They dragged him to his feet. He was disoriented, blinded, and terrified, and in his terror his mind grasped for a reason, any reason, why this was happening to him so he could make it stop. "I swallowed it," Marcus blurted out. "I swallowed the heroin. That's why I ran." The officers paused. "You swallowed drugs?" "Yes, yes, just please help me." Now we need to pause here. Why would Marcus confess to a felony he didn't commit? Why would he say he swallowed drugs? Later, his lawyer would explain the tragic logic of the streets. Marcus knew that if you are just a suspect, you go to jail. But if you are a suspect who has ingested a lethal amount of narcotics, per department policy, the police must take you to the hospital. Marcus was lying to save his life. He felt his eye collapsing in his head. He knew he needed a doctor, not a cell, so he invented a crime to force their hand. They loaded him into the ambulance. The adrenaline began to fade for the officers, replaced by the bureaucratic shuffling of paperwork. At the hospital, the doctors were horrified. The ophthalmologist who examined Marcus later testified that it looked like a bomb had gone off inside the eye. There was nothing to save. The structure was gone. The optic nerve was severed. Marcus Thorne would never see out of that eye again. And the toxicology report, the blood test, clean, 0, negative. There was no heroin. There was no cocaine. There was no alcohol. Marcus had been stone cold sober. He was just a roofer getting tools who got scared. In the weeks that followed, the Oakwood Heights Police Department circled the wagons. They charged Marcus with resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. They tried to paint him as a dangerous criminal who had lured officers into a chase. Officer Derek Vance was not suspended. He was not fired. In fact, in a twist that feels like it belongs in a dystopian novel, he was promoted. Within months of blinding an innocent man, Vance was made a sergeant. He was now in charge of training other officers. But they forgot one thing. They forgot about David Sterling. David Sterling was a civil rights attorney with a reputation for being a pit bull in a cheap suit. He took Marcus's case when no one else would. He looked at the broken man sitting in his office, wearing an eye patch, unable to work, traumatized by loud noises, and he saw a fight worth having. Sterling filed a federal lawsuit alleging excessive force, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The police department laughed. They had qualified immunity. They had the badge. They had the narrative. But Sterling had the video. The trial took place in a sterile federal courtroom in downtown Cleveland. The jury was a mix of suburbanites and city folk, people who generally respected the police. Sterling knew he had an uphill battle. He had to show them that you can support law enforcement and still condemn a monster. During his opening statement, Sterling walked to the podium. He didn't use fancy legal jargon. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was a single large dark grape. He held it up to the light. The jury watched, confused. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling said, his voice quiet, "this is a grape. It's soft. It's fragile. If I squeeze it just a little, it bursts." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. The doctor who treated Marcus Thorne said that to do to a human eye what Officer Vance did to Marcus, you would need to apply 250 pounds per square inch of pressure. You have to hit it with the force of a baseball bat swing. He put the grape down on the defense table, right in front of Officer Vance. This officer didn't just punch Marcus. He executed a punishment. He squished his eye like a grape. The trial was a war of attrition. The defense tried to blame Marcus. Why did he run? They asked. If he had nothing to hide, why run? He confessed to swallowing heroin, they shouted. Sterling countered with the truth. He ran because he was scared. He lied because he was dying. Being scared isn't a crime. Running away doesn't give the police the right to mutilate you. But the turning point, the moment the air left the room, was when Sterling played the frame-by-frame breakdown of the body camera footage. Officer Vance had testified that he tried to hit Marcus in the body, but Marcus ducked into the punch. Sterling played the video. Pause. Advance one frame. Pause. Look at the officer's left hand, Sterling pointed out. On the screen, grainy but undeniable, Officer Vance's left hand was grabbing Marcus's shirt. He was pulling Marcus up. He was anchoring him. "He isn't missing," Sterling said. "He is holding him in place to get better leverage for the strike. He is pulling the target into the fist." The jury stared. The war cry audio played again. "Woo! I'ma tase you." "Yeah, baby." It didn't sound like policing. It sounded like a blood sport. Then came the use of force expert, a former SWAT commander from Los Angeles. He sat on the stand, looked at the video, and shook his head. "This is a containment situation," the expert explained. "The suspect is on the ground. He is cornered. He is unarmed. There is no exigency. There is no weapon. To strike a subject in the head when they are on their knees is not police work. It is assault. It is deadly force applied without cause." Officer Vance took the stand. He was arrogant. He sat back in his chair, chewed gum, and insisted he did what he had to do. He talked about officer safety. He talked about split-second decisions. But the jury wasn't buying it. They looked at Marcus, sitting silently with his eye patch. They looked at Vance, the newly promoted sergeant, smirking on the stand. We are nearing the end of this story, and I want to ask you a question that hung over that courtroom for days. What is your eyesight worth? If someone wrote you a check right now, how many zeros would it take for you to agree to let them destroy one of your eyes? Is there a number? The jury deliberated for less than a day. They came back into the courtroom. The judge asked for the verdict. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Marcus Thorne. The courtroom let out a collective breath. But then came the damages. The jury awarded Marcus Thorne $4.5 million. It was a staggering sum for a police brutality case in that district. It was a message. It was the jury saying to the Oakwood Heights Police Department, "We do not accept this. We do not accept that a non-emergency call about walking through a yard ends in blindness." Marcus cried. He didn't cheer. He just put his head in his hands and wept, because $4 million can buy a nice house. It can buy a nice car. It can buy security, but it cannot buy a new optic nerve. It cannot bring back the left side of his peripheral vision. It cannot erase the PTSD that flares up every time he hears a siren. The aftermath was bittersweet. The taxpayers of Oakwood Heights footed the bill. The insurance companies paid out. And Officer Derek Vance, he kept his promotion. He kept his badge. He kept his pension. To this day, he patrols the streets, a supervisor teaching younger officers how to handle suspicious persons. The department issued a brief statement disagreeing with the verdict, stating that they stand behind the actions of our officers in the field. Marcus moved away. He couldn't stay in the town that took his sight. He bought a small place in the country, far away from busy roads, far away from neighbors who peek through blinds. He lives a quiet life. But every morning, when he looks in the mirror to shave, he sees the scar. He sees the glass eye that replaced the real one. He sees the permanent reminder that in the eyes of the state, he was just a grape waiting to be crushed. This story isn't just about one bad apple. It's about the orchard. It's about a system where a neighbor's vague anxiety can launch a paramilitary assault. It's about a culture where "I'ma tase you, baby" is a battle cry for public servants. It is a reminder that our rights are fragile things. They exist on paper, but on the street, they are only as strong as the restraint of the officer standing in front of you. If you think Officer Vance should have been fired, hit the like button so this video spreads. If you think the jury got it right, share this with someone who needs to see it. And if you want to help us keep telling these stories, please subscribe. We can't give Marcus his eye back, but we can make sure the world sees what happened to him. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. And remember, film everything. Because without that camera, Marcus Thorne would just be another resisting suspect in a police report. Good night.